Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Suggett, and I'm the Executive Director of CARSP, which is the Canadian Association of Road Safety Professionals. And welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled How We Can Make School Zones Safer. And I have the pleasure of actually having my husband, Jeff Suggett, who's with SEMA, do today's webinar, and I will give his bio in just a minute. So I'm very excited to have him on the show. So just first of all, CARSP is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting Canada's road safety professionals and international road safety professionals. We have some members, and we've been around since 1985. And we have a conference coming up next year in May, from 20 to 23rd of May, and I invite you to check that out. Also, just a little plug that our call for abstracts deadline was extended, and it is on until next Monday. So I just want to remind you again that December 2nd is the deadline for the abstracts. I also want to take this opportunity to talk to you about the upcoming webinar that's going to be taking place in December on the 11th, and it is entitled Perceptions and Behaviors of Cannabis-Impaired Drivers, 2024 Results from CAA's Annual Cannabis-Impaired Driving Survey of Ontario Drivers. And Teresa DeFelice from the CAA Club Group is going to be giving that presentation. And it's going to be a great one. So I highly recommend that you sign up for that one. Now, for those of you who aren't members, and I know there are some who've paid the $50 fee, and thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to encourage you, though, to consider membership. It is very affordable. It's just $125 a year, and that gives you access to all these webinars, the monthly ones. You get the free access throughout the whole year. And membership is based on an anniversary date. So if you were to join today, for instance, you'd have a whole year worth of benefits before your membership was up for renewal. So now I'm going to turn to today's webinar, and I'm going to introduce my husband. Once again, his name is Jeffrey Suggett. He has 25 years of consulting experience in the field of road safety, traffic operations, transportation planning, environmental assessments, and for road infrastructure projects and traffic engineering. He has managed a wide variety of complex technical projects for clients in both the municipal and private sector throughout Southern Ontario. Jeffrey has completed and managed a wide range of traffic studies, both for municipalities and developers, including traffic input into the secondary plans, construction management and staging, traffic input into constructability studies, traffic impact studies, speed and delay studies, queuing studies, traffic operation analyses, corridor reviews, and parking assessments. So he's definitely very qualified. So welcome, Jeff, and I will pass the mic over to you.
All right, just wanted to thank everybody for joining us on the Lunch and Learn today. I'll be sharing with you on school zone assessments. I did want to confirm that everybody can see me and hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. And please let me know that you can see my screen.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so Brenda invited me to share on a project that we recently completed for the City of Vaughan. This is a sort of a two-part, and I'm sharing one of the parts with you on school zone assessments. There was a broader project that we did looking at the overall school zone safety plan that we also developed for the city. I will not be presenting on that, but I'll be presenting on one aspect of that project, specifically looking at school zone assessments. I do want to acknowledge the city who had extensive involvement in this project. Margie Chung with the City of Vaughan was their lead with the city, and of course was instrumental in helping develop the many recommendations that you will see presented over the course of this presentation. So if you are interested in learning more about this project, I believe that the report will be finalized and posted to the city's website in the near term. So please look for it on the city's website. So let's begin. Over the next couple of minutes, I will be going over the following items. So I'll be talking about the study objectives, be talking about school assessments, how we undertook these various school zone assessments, the scope of our review, our methodology, the findings. What did we find when we finished looking at all these various schools? And then recommendations, both recommendations specific to the schools that we had to look at, but also overarching recommendations that we felt applied to the entire city. And then finally, an implementation plan. So just to give you a broad look at the overall project, not just what we are presenting today, looking at school zone assessments. Again, this was a project that the city invited us to help them with. It involved developing a comprehensive strategy to improve safety and accessibility within school zones, the Safer School Zone Plan. So we wanted to look at broadly how the city was doing safer school zones. How were they making these school zones safe? How were they promoting active transportation? But more specifically in this presentation, we're looking at how we did these school assessments. And the city asked us to look at 20 specific schools of interest within their city, and that's what our presentation is about today. I should just let you know that of those 20 schools, 8 were part of the city's active school travel program. So they had already selected these schools out as candidates for promoting active school travel, and they wanted to make sure we included them in our 20 schools that we looked at. And again, as we looked at these various schools, it helped us to inform the overall recommendations in the overall study, the Safer School Zone Plan. Wanted to highlight for you the vision statement that we developed as part of the overall project, the Safer School Zone Plan. It's shown in the bottom of the screen there in the blue box. Their vision statement was the City of Vaughan strives to provide a safe and barrier-free environment in its residential neighborhoods that encourages children living near its schools to walk, cycle, and roll to school. So a couple key elements to pull out there. First of all, safe. It's important that the travel that students undertake to get to school is safe, barrier-free, so it is accessible for people that have accessibility needs. And also it's encouraging active school travel. Unfortunately, when parents feel that it's not safe for their children to travel to school on their own steam, either by walking or cycling, etc., they're going to drive their children to school. And of course, that's not going to be promoting active school travel. And as more and more parents are driving their children to school, they're actually introducing safety issues at schools, and they're actually compounding the problem that they are seeking to avoid. And so we wanted to reverse that, and part of that involves making the trip to school as safe as possible. So in terms of the overall project, you can see the various elements of the work that we're doing. It was really a 6-stage process, and I'll go over the overall project, and I'll talk to you about how these school zone assessments tie into it. So as part of the overall project, we were trying to understand background information and current practice as it relates to school zones, finding out what other jurisdictions were doing and what various engineering standards and guidelines tell us what we should be doing. We then wanted to observe what's going on at a selected group of schools within the city and look at conditions at those schools and document issues and concerns. We wanted to look at traffic data and document issues based on traffic data, and this included collisions and speed data. We also wanted to engage with internal and external stakeholders, identify recommendations to address safety, promote active school travel, and then document our findings in a comprehensive report. Now, what I'm going to be talking about is specifically these school zone assessments. And as you can see, there's these 2 call-out boxes the one towards the top of the screen, and that is doing these field assessments at these 20 schools. And of course, looking down towards the bottom, you can see that out of the recommendations that we've discovered for those 20 schools, they were then applied to those 20 schools, but then we applied them more broadly to the entire city. And you'll see those broader recommendations that came out of those 20 schools later on in the presentation today. So what were we doing? We wanted to go out and look at these schools and get a really good understanding as to what was going on at these schools. And so we actually spent some time at each of these schools observing what was happening. I should let you know that the city selected these 20 locations by looking at the operating speeds and volumes in front of the school, and also city staff insights into ongoing issues at each school. They already knew that these schools were problematic, and they wanted to make sure that we included them in our list. And of course, as I said earlier, 8 of the schools were part of their pilot program, and so of course they wanted to make sure we looked at those schools as well. Before we went out on site, we prepared a prompt list. We wanted to use that prompt list to get a good understanding of what to look for as we were out on site. And so the prompt list had a number of questions, things that we should be looking at as we are observing activity with the arrival and dismissal, and more broadly looking at the surrounding road network. We made sure that school staff knew that we were coming out. We wanted to make sure there was no sensitivities with parents seeing us out there and not knowing who we are and maybe being concerned. And so we told school administrative staff that we were planning to be out that day, and they, of course, informed their parents that we were going to be there. We went out and observed the arrival and dismissal periods because, of course, that's when the hub of activity occurs with parents picking up and dropping off their children, and that's when we potentially could see some issues with safety. So we also looked at the overall road network and tried to see if there was opportunities for improvement within the overall road network surrounding each of the schools. So we looked at speed, volume, and collision data specific to each school. We looked at information for the active school travel pilot locations on active school travel, how many children were actually walking to school. And the city also gave us some police enforcement data for those schools, which we were also able to have a look at. We reviewed the layout of the pickup and drop-off area, the bus loading and unloading loop. We looked at signs. We looked at associated pavement markings along the roads in front of the school. More broadly, looking at those roads, we looked at the cross-section of the roads, signs and pavement markings. We wanted to look at anything particular that relates to school operations, also what was available for pedestrians and cyclists, and also overall active transportation infrastructure. So we wanted to really highlight back to the city what was working well. We didn't want to be negative in our review and be always pointing out problems. So we did see a lot of things that seemed to be working well. And of course, we noted this to the city. And so here's some things that we saw that were working well. And I've got them grouped into 3 groups. Things that were working well internal to the school, so on the school property, things that were working well on roads in front of the school, and finally, things that were in the surrounding road network that we felt were working well. And this is what we noted. So we noted internal to the school that there was separate laneways for parent pickup and drop off and bus loading and unloading. So keeping those apart helped to eliminate conflicts between those 2 activities. And so we saw that, and we liked that. We did also see that parents and our parent volunteers and teachers were getting involved. They were aiding with safe movements associated with the pickup and drop off. So that was good to see. They would put things out like gates or use pylons to direct traffic. So in some instances, they would actually close off the entrance to the school at certain points to eliminate conflicts with parents driving into the school immediately before the arrival or the dismissal, and for a period of time afterwards. On the roads in front of the school, we saw that they were using school crossing guards, and so we felt that they were doing their job properly and appropriately. We also saw that the city had no parking stopping restrictions posted in front of the schools, as well as parking aprons to bring parents off the road and then facilitate a safe pickup and drop off as well. Within the surrounding road network, we observed that they had school zone and school crossing guard signs, and these did, for the most part, conform to the Ontario traffic manual guidelines. And we also saw that they had put in traffic calming at the active school travel schools, those 8 schools that I mentioned to you earlier, and these were effective at reducing speeds in front of those schools. We did see, however, that there was some areas where they should be improving things. So first of all, internal to the school, we did note that there was faded and non-existent pavement markings or signs. So it was difficult for them to be seen by parents and of course read and interpret what they should be doing. We did note that parents were disobeying those signs and pavement markings, or disobeying the use of pylons that had been put up by parent volunteers or teachers. On roads in front of the schools, we did note in some instances some higher operating speeds, excessive congestion, parents parking and stopping in unsafe locations, such as on the opposite side of the road or near an entrance to the school where they would be blocking sight lines for buses or other vehicles exiting a school. In the surrounding road network, we did see some gaps in the sidewalk network, inconsistencies in crosswalk markings or curb cuts, and inconsistencies in the use of tactile strips and stop bars. So again, that goes back to accessibility, making sure that those that are visually impaired can navigate. And of course, if somebody's in a wheelchair and there's no curb cuts, they can't get back up off the road onto the sidewalk again. So we did have a whole suite of recommendations as an outcome of our look at those 20 schools, and they're listed here. I should point out that the S, M, and L refer to short, medium, and long-term treatment. Some of these things will take some time to implement, and so they can't do them right away, but other things are quick wins they'll be able to implement right away. So internal to the school, we recommended improvements to signs and pavement markings, and increased deployment of staff resources and physical changes to the school property. In front of the school, we recommended that they put in pedestrian crossovers, and these are crossing locations that vehicles have to yield the right of way to the pedestrians. No stopping restrictions. We recommended those be put in place in undesirable locations. Increase their no stopping, no parking signage. Increased bylaw enforcement and putting up no U-turn signs, because we did observe some parents that were actually doing that. In the surrounding road network, we've recommended as well pedestrian crossovers, improved trail connections, and improved consistency in crosswalk markings, the addition or removal of curb cuts, the use of tactile strips or stop bars at controlled intersections. Okay, so now we're going to go through some of our recommendations. We had 29. Here we're only looking at those that are engineering related. Our overall presentation does go into some other recommendations that are non-engineering related. But in terms of things relating to engineering, we're going to go through a few of these now. And we'll start with this one here. The gray box is what they're currently doing, and the green box is what we're recommending. So basically, school prioritization assessment. As I said earlier, we had done these school assessments at 20 locations. We had also developed a prioritized list for future school assessments, and we looked at factors that would help us to rank which schools they should look at in the future. And that was based on things such as the average annual daily traffic, speed, collision history, number of lanes, number of crossing guards, and the type of school. And so we had recommended that the city continue doing these school assessments beyond the 20, using our prompt list and using our prioritized list in order of priority. We asked them to continue doing them and do it in the same approach that we had done ours. So look at all the different items that we had considered in our different school assessments. Future school site design was another thing, because we did see that there was opportunities to improve the layout of schools. And we wanted to make sure that there was guidance for future schools in a city such as Vaughan that is still expanding. And in many situations, they are building new neighborhoods and building new schools in those neighborhoods. So here's a great opportunity to integrate good school site design into those brand new schools before they are built. And so we emphasize to them that school site design is a critical step in ensuring active school travel is encouraged and ensure that there's minimal conflicts between vehicles, that is parents and buses, and pedestrians and cyclists. And this can be done at the development stage. Placement in the neighborhood is important. It's also important to look at barriers to active school travel and other nearby schools. It's also important to consider the layout and the relationship of the school to the street. So in terms of barriers, there could be natural barriers. There could be barriers such as busy arterial roads, and making sure that the catchment area for your school doesn't require children to cross busy arterial roads to get to the school. Make sure the catchment areas are encompassed within a neighborhood itself rather than spanning across a busy arterial road. And so our recommendation was that the city school board during the design and review process look at these different things, look at the placement of the school in the context of the surrounding area, and look at the design of the school in relationship to the adjacent roads, as well as that internal layout, making sure there's a separate area for school bus pickup and drop off that's separate and distinct from a parent pickup drop off area. Traffic calming, as I mentioned, they had already put in traffic calming at their active school travel pilot locations, the 8 locations, and they were pleased to see that speeds were reduced at those locations. The city had also recently developed a neighborhood traffic calming plan, and these things will then inform the future rollout of continued traffic calming at other city schools. And so we recommended that they continue to prioritize implementation of traffic calming at city schools in support of their active school travel program, and in general at locations experiencing higher operating speeds. Some of the things that they are implementing and are going to continue to implement are radar message boards, slow down pavement markings, ladder crosswalks, center line edge lines, and these narrow the roads, as well as flex posts. And you can see a little picture of one in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. They should also leverage experience that they learned from their neighborhood traffic calming plan, because they had done pilots in 5 neighborhoods, and that helped them to know what works and what does not work as well, and use that in considering future traffic calming in front of schools. Improve pedestrian and cycling facilities. So there was pedestrian crossovers that the city had already implemented as part of their program to roll these out. We had identified a number of them in our hotspot school reviews, some additional other locations. We had identified gaps in sidewalk trail connectivity near schools, and we also noted the city's desire to implement cycling facilities in all arterial and collector roads. So we had all sorts of recommendations relating to those areas. We recommended that they consider a citywide review of candidate locations for future pedestrian crossovers, address gaps in sidewalk trail connectivity, explicitly review sidewalk trail connectivity in future residential developments, and also provide dedicated cycling facilities on arterial collector roads. And we said here 1.6 and 3.2, the reason being is because school busing is not provided for children in the elementary age or in the high school age below those numbers. So these would be the kids that would be having to walk or cycle to school. And so we wanted to target our recommendations to those areas close by these schools. I mentioned that there was all sorts of issues with parking and stopping. The city has a number of prohibitions already in place that they've put in place according to their bylaws relating to private driveways, intersections, pedestrian crossovers, and school crossing guard locations. We did see a lot of bad behavior on the part of parents, blocking accesses or stopping close to intersections or doing a pickup drop off on the opposite side of a road to school. You can see the example picture there where we have a student that's walking across a busy road that's lined with parked cars on both sides. That's not safe, and we wanted to really discourage that behavior. So we wanted them to put this into their bylaw, for instance, prohibiting stopping near school entrances, and also prohibit stopping on the opposite side of the road in front of a school if they haven't done that already. And also look at no parking, no stopping requirements in the OTM book, where you're putting a pedestrian crossover in place or a crossing guard location. There is already no parking, no stopping restriction. So making sure that that's written into their bylaw going forward. This was a really interesting one, and we're excited by this one because the city did go forward with this recommendation. And this is to reduce the posted speed on local roads within the city that are in school zones. They currently have a 40K speed zone in neighborhoods and school zones. And we do note that pedestrians at higher speeds have a much less survivability outcome from a collision with a vehicle. You can see the little graphic in the bottom of your screen that shows at 30 kilometers per hour, you've got a 90% chance of surviving the collision. At 50 kilometers per hour, it drops to 60. At 65, it drops to 20. So that's certainly disturbing. We want to make sure that if the pedestrian is involved in a collision, as unfortunate as it may happen, they have a high survivability outcome, and that's where this 30 kilometer per hour posted speed comes in place. And so we have recommended that the city assess the feasibility of implementing this on local roads, but only in conjunction with traffic calming, community safety zones, and automated speed enforcement. We did note that this is going to involve a long-term shift in behavior, and it's going to involve a commitment from a variety of different stakeholders, not only city staff, but York Regional Police and others. So in terms of the hotspot school recommendations, the city is currently underway implementing our recommendations for our 20 different schools. They're spreading them out over 4 years. They're doing one school per ward per year. They're implementing them based on a priority ranking scheme that we developed, and of course, prioritizing the high priority recommendations. They're also looking to leverage other projects where possible. So if they're already in the area doing a local street improvement, they're adding in the recommendations that we've identified into that local area improvement. And of course, the work is pending budget and staffing resources. So in terms of lessons learned, sort of a key summary, the hotspot school assessments that we did, the 20, they really helped us to know what is going on, not only specifically at the 20 locations, but then more broadly, what is probably happening throughout the whole city. And so it helped us to identify citywide opportunities to improve safety and promote active school travel. And so the recommendations as the outcome of our work are going to help the city to promote a multimodal road network and achieve its vision for the overall Safer School Zone project. And so that's it for my presentation. I wanted to thank the various people that were involved in this project. You can see the City of Vaughan's PM management team that is listed on the left-hand side of your screen, with myself as part of the consulting team, and my colleague Isabel, who was a key component of the work that we did. So I wanted to also thank all the stakeholders that were involved in this study, not only city staff, but the variety of external stakeholders that were instrumental in helping us craft out our recommendations. So that's it for my presentation. I understand now that we're going to welcome questions from those participating in the call today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jeff. That was an excellent presentation, very detailed, and it's great, these kind of presentations that get down to the nitty gritty of how to do these kind of things like school zone assessments. Often we do have presentations that are kind of overviews of why it's important to have safe school zones, but to get down to the nitty-gritty of actually how you do it is something that I think a lot of people welcome, and they want that kind of detail because they're experiencing similar issues in their communities and they want to know how to address it. So, and I also remember we had asked you prior to this doing the webinar if there was a chance people could have that prompt list that you had mentioned at the beginning, the one that you had assessed each of the schools with, and you said that you could share that. So that's
Yes, yeah,
great.
we'd be happy to
Excellent.
share that with you.
Yeah, and also I want to make people aware that this will be posted to this webinar. It just takes us a couple days to get it up on the website, and so you can come back and review it. But you're correct. Right now is the question and answer period. So if you could submit those either in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will take those questions one at a time. So I will start now. Okay, so the first question is, how far do school zones extend in Ontario? In BC, the Motor Vehicle Act limits school zones to the part of the road directly adjacent to school property frontages.
Okay, so according to the Highway Traffic Act, school zones should extend 150 meters beyond the school property in either direction.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I've got another question here. Could you please expand on the concept of hotspots? And then this person went on to give a bit more detail, for instance, a definition, the elements, the assessment process. Can you give us, when you say hotspots, what do you mean by hotspots? And how do you define those, and how do you analyze those?
Okay, so the city staff selected the 20 hotspot school locations. We coined the term hotspot because they were schools where there was an increased interest in looking at them. I mentioned that 8 of the schools were already part of an active school travel program, so they were keenly interested in looking at those locations to see what we could do to further improve safety and promote active travel at those schools. But more broadly, looking at the other ones, the other 12, I should say, city staff knew that there was concerns at those schools. They knew that there was a history of collisions occurring there. There was excessive speeds observed on the road in front of the schools. And they also knew that there was complaints, a lot of complaints from the public, from parents, from school administration relating to safety at those schools. So hotspots involved a lot of different considerations. I mean, the other thing I'll point out is they wanted to make sure they were evenly distributed throughout the city. And so another consideration was that each ward be included in there because they wanted to make sure that there was equity in the city in terms of the selection of the schools.
Okay, very good. Thank you. My next question is, what range of operating speeds did you observe at the schools?
Okay,
And
I don't
probably
have, yeah,
the surrounding areas too.
yeah. I don't have that number at my fingertips, but I would guess that we did have some speeds on some of the roads in front of schools that were 4 lanes. And of course, on a 4-lane road, you're going to get higher speeds. Some of the 4-lane roads, I'm guessing were probably in the high 50s. Unfortunately, I don't have the number handy to actually give you anything specific.
Yeah, and that kind of relates to the same person's second question, what he was wondering about how many schools were on local or collector or arterial streets. And I remember you saying when you're first of all, planning for a school and for the access points, I guess, to make sure that they're not on arterial or collector or whatever. But obviously, if it's already in place, he was just curious how many were currently on collector or arterial roads.
I would hazard a guess that again, without having the actual numbers in front of me, that a vast majority of them were on local roads, and that's where I I feel they are best placed. There was a handful of ones on collector roads. Um, but again, fortunately, most of them were on local roads. And so for the collector roads, you do have a bit more of a battle to try to calm traffic in front of those locations. You're a little bit limited in what you can do, and of course, what you do may not be as effective.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I've got another question here. You've discussed several potential improvements for school zones. Could you also recommend any specific technological solutions that might enhance safety in these areas?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple that come to mind are speed display boards. The city does have those and is actively rolling them out. They basically have these rolled out to different locations on a temporary basis. So again, a speed display board shows the speed of approaching vehicles to the driver on the approach and reminds them if they are driving above the posted speed. The other one, of course, that the city is going to be rolling out imminently is automated speed enforcement. And so they have put in community safety zones at all their school sites. And within a community safety zone in Ontario, by legislation, you may implement automated speed enforcement. And of course, this is a camera that's posted next to the road that photographs vehicles traveling above the speed limit and issues a ticket to the owner of that vehicle. And of course, that has been shown to be effective at discouraging speeds in excess of the speed limit. And the city's targeting schools for the rollout of their automated speed enforcement program.
Well, that's great news. I've got another question here. It is, did you, or sorry, did you also develop concept plans for recommended engineering improvements?
No, we did not. That we didn't get to that level of detail in our work. Um, the city will be probably where there's an improvement, such as a pedestrian crossover or something a little bit more involved. They'll probably be retaining a consultant or doing a plan internally to roll out those types of improvements.
Okay, perfect. The next question is how the space requirements for pickup and drop off areas, as well as school zone parking areas, were studied. So how were the space requirements for pickup and drop off areas, as well as the school zone parking areas studied? Some school zones have space limitations. Can we use them interchangeably? I guess the methods.
Okay, so this raises a really interesting point. What's the trade-off between providing adequate parking facilities for parents to come and pick up and drop off their children versus trying to discourage them from going to schools and picking up and dropping off their children? I mean, if you provided unlimited parking, is that going to encourage everybody to drive their children to school, which is totally against the goal of this project? So we're of the philosophy that we're not catering to parents that need to use their vehicle to, or I should say, we're not catering to parents to drive their kids to school. Obviously, there's a clear need with some certain individuals, but we don't want to accommodate all of them. So our philosophy was, okay, if they not to cater to them, but to make sure that you direct them to places where they can safely park and stop to drop off their children, but not expand any existing parking facilities to encourage them to choose to drive to school as opposed to having their child walk or cycle to school.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The next question is, did the schools identify champions from school to work with the city on implementation of the school travel plans? And how was the response from schools on implementing the plans from the perspective of education in classrooms?
Okay, so we weren't as involved with that aspect of the work. However, I will say that the active school travel program that was done at that 8 schools was a success. They did have school staff on board. They worked with city staff to promote the program. City staff were actually invited to come into schools and do presentations at assemblies. Of course, you needed to, have that champion on staff that can work with city staff in promoting it. As part of the overall active school travel pilot study, they tracked month over month children that were walking or cycling to school because they wanted to see if there was an overall improvement, if there was an overall uptake in children that were walking and cycling to school. And they were pleased to see that across the 8 schools that were involved in the original active school travel pilot, there was a definite and marked increase in the number of students that were walking and cycling to school. So it was a success, but getting back to your original point, you do have to have those champions on staff that can help to promote active school travel.
That's great. And I seem to recall during your presentation that that the police were involved in that active transportation pilot. And I just wondered if you could comment on what their role was with it.
Okay, so they were involved on the enforcement side. They didn't really get involved in the in going into the schools at the time of our study, and this is maybe an outcome of COVID, I'm not sure, but police were not permitted to go into the schools. And so that was sort of a limitation. We would hope that eventually gets removed, that limitation, so that police can then get actively involved in doing presentations at schools to promote traffic safety.
Yeah, and focus more on education as well as the enforcement side, which they often do. Okay, great. And my next question is, any indication of which improvements were most effective at encouraging safer behaviors from parent guardian pickup and drop off? There's a way.
That was a large component of our study was monitoring and evaluation, having the city go in and monitor and evaluate how effective the different treatments were. They definitely are planning on doing that. As I said earlier, they put in the traffic calming in front of those 8 pilot schools, and they were pleased to see a reduction in speeds across the board at all the schools except for one, and that was the 4-lane, the school that was on the 4-lane road. Unfortunately, they didn't achieve the same kind of improvement, and so lessons learned. They'll need to reconsider appropriate traffic calming treatments for that particular school, as the 4-lane road wasn't suitable for the things that they had identified.
Okay, great. The next question is, were AST, and I'm not quite sure what that stands for, if that's automated speech, after active school travel. Okay, were AST programs included as part of your recommendation, including walking school bus programs, bike trains, encouragement activities, and so forth? And you just talked about that with the 8 pilot ones that you did.
Yes, we recommended that the city continue with active school travel. We didn't get into a lot of specifics with the different components of the active school travel program. I will let you know, though, that we're currently doing another study for the city of Markham, and active school travel is sort of a larger focus area for that project. If you are interested, once we have that project done and with the city's permission, we'd be happy to share further information with you with regards to our evaluation of the city of Markham's active school travel program and the individual recommendations that we identified.
Oh, we'd love to have you back to share that. I think there'd be great interest in that. So And I have your phone number so I can contact you.
Okay.
Okay, the next question is through your public involvement process, do you discover any reasons given by parents not to allow their children to walk to school? And please elaborate. I mean, you've mentioned them feeling, you know, just that it's not safe is a big, definite deterrent. Was there any other things, any other concerns other than just lack of safety?
Okay, so I think the question was why parents feel they should not permit their children to walk or cycle to school.
Yeah, like when you were involved with, they said a public involvement process. I don't know if you actually spoke to the public, but were there other reasons, I guess, other than just not feeling it was safe, that parents were discouraging or not allowing, I should say, their children to walk to school?
We didn't drill down into the parent level, and we did speak to parent councils and school administration. They told us secondhand that there were concerns on the part of parents about being afraid to permit their children to walk or cycle to school, basically because of, unfortunately, the chaos happening at some schools with the pickup and drop off with parents driving aggressively and parking and stopping in unsafe locations, doing U-turns, etc. So we have to reverse that. We have to make the school safer, make sure that parents are behaving in a safe manner, and discouraging parents from driving their children to school, walking and cycling. I mean, in a perfect world, if none of the parents dropped their kids off, if all the children walked or cycled to school, you wouldn't have any of the vehicle congestion or concerns happening at school sites.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem that exacerbates itself. It's just kind of like a circle. Okay, so there's another question here. You showed a picture of what seemed to be a wide intersection. Did you recommend reconfiguring the intersection? I'm not quite sure which one he's referring to, but
I can't recall the specific picture, but we didn't get into that level of detail. We certainly looked at traffic control at intersections. We looked at accessibility, making sure that crosswalk markings were consistent and conspicuous, making sure that they were accessible, so curb cuts were provided where they should be, not provided where they shouldn't be. So encouraging students to cross at appropriate locations, and of course, having school crossing guards in place to direct children at key locations nearby schools.
okay, great. Thank you. And another question is, I'm wondering if there are any recommendations for minimum parking space sizes and or pickup and drop off areas.
We didn't get into that level of detail with our work. We were more focused on making sure parents were parking and stopping in areas that are appropriate and discouraging or prohibiting them from parking in areas where they shouldn't be.
Okay, perfect. We'll keep those questions coming in. There is another one here. I think you've already kind of answered it, but in case you have any other additional insights, how do you encourage parents who feel unsafe to send their children in to bicycle, to use a bicycle to get to school? Like, you said you didn't really drill down to speaking to the parents, but you heard secondhand that there was a lot of safety concerns. I don't know, do you have any insights of how to make parents encourage their children to walk or bicycle to school?
Well, we did hear secondhand about different initiatives at a local school level that promote cycling, as basically cycling rodeos, there's where they close off basically the parking lot and kids kind of learn how to cycle safely. At high schools, there's a lot of clubs that get involved with repairing bicycles. We heard about that. Also, there was a grant, I believe, through some a group with the province of Ontario where they were providing funding to provide bike racks in front of each school. And that's fantastic. Obviously, if there's no bike rack, where do kids put their bikes when they get to school? So those kind of things, promoting cycling can be a first step towards increase the number of children that are cycling to school.
Okay, great. Um, I'm just wondering from the perspective of a municipality that's listening in right now, what are some countermeasures that they can put into place that are relatively cost effective, that are, I should say, more affordable, let's say. You mentioned that going forward that the city of Vaughan is kind of picking one sort of area to focus on per year in terms of the cost, a major cost. And I'm sure other municipalities are in the same boat where they can't, implement all the recommendations at once. But what are some that are fairly inexpensive to put in place?
I would say that pavement marking and sign related treatments are quite inexpensive and can achieve sort of quick wins. And so those should be considered first.
Okay, perfect. Now you mentioned that the city of Vaughan is also following up on and looking at the long-term effectiveness of the recommendations and the treatments that you had recommended. I just wondered if they have a plan to put that into a report and maybe potentially share that with other municipalities. I don't know if that's a possibility or.
That's a good question. I can ask city staff. Um, I mean that ideally it would be great if they share this report with others so that others can kind of learn and get inspiration from them. Um, the report is still in draft final stage, so it's not quite complete. Once it's completed, the city may choose to make it available on their website.
Okay, perfect. And I'm not seeing any. Oh, sorry. Yes, there is actually one other one. Okay. You mentioned implementing new pedestrian crosswalks in front of the schools. Are these replacing existing school crossing guard locations, or are they additional to the current school crossing locations?
We had recommended that the city review the need for pedestrian crossovers at key locations, either in front of the school or nearby the school, where there appeared to be a need for a controlled crossing at that location. So again, a pedestrian crossover gives the right of way to the pedestrians crossing the road over the vehicle. So it is a great tool in the toolbox that the city supports and is currently rolling out.
Now, were those new areas for pedestrian crossovers in addition to where the school crossing guard locations are? Like, are they supplementing?
Um, well, actually, the city has a policy of replacing all of their mid-block or crossing guard locations at uncontrolled locations with a pedestrian crossover. And so that's what they are currently gradually doing over time across the whole city.
Okay, okay. And would the school crossing guard still be there at these pedestrian crossovers and
Yes.
assisting, obviously? Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Oh, I see another one here. Uh, let's see, we've got a time for another couple, I think. Do you think that advising the school that you were coming on a particular day, that behavior could have been worse to sway what the situation really was? So, with them knowing that you're coming, I guess it depends on who you're observing. If it's the parents, I don't know. Do you think, because it did sound like you told the administrators at the school and then the school somehow communicated to the parents, do you think parents were on their best behavior when they were interacting?
I don't think necessarily. I mean, the way it was couched was, we have a consultant that's coming just to observe what's going on at the school. It's not like we were watching for particular behaviors. I don't think they would interpret it that way. And certainly with, the bad behavior that we still observed, it certainly didn't stop some individuals from continuing to behave in a unsafe manner.
Okay, perfect.
I
Uh,
mean, we had to, we had to let them know. Otherwise, the other scenario is you get parents that are concerned. There's these strangers that are watching my children. Why are they there? We wanted to make sure that parents were informed and not misinterpreting our reason for being there.
yeah, very good point. And maybe one last question, because we are getting near the end of our hour here, is does the city of Vaughan use school zone flashers, or are the schools 30 kilometers per hour, 24/7, 365?
Okay, so just to clarify, the city has not yet implemented their 30K the school zones. Right now, they don't have flashers, they just have the static signs. They don't want to go ahead with the flashers in the future because they want to roll out automated speed enforcement. And the concern is if you have a flasher and an automated speed enforcement camera, there could be court challenges. Somebody could claim, oh, the flasher wasn't activated, therefore I was driving at a legal speed. And so just to clear up that confusion, the city is going with the static signs, no flashers, and basically the lower speed would be in place at all times.
Very good point. And I think we do have time for one more question. I'll just squeeze it in. How did you go about the process of looking for locations for new schools? Are there any suburban schools in your sample? Please explain the criteria. I mean, you mentioned the hotspots and how you came up with those. Was there any other criteria other than the ones linked to the hotspots that you used?
Okay, well, again, the city staff selected the 20 locations for us to look at. We didn't have any say in those locations. They were in a mixture of older neighborhoods and newer, kind of more suburban neighborhoods. So we did see a good cross section of different types of schools and school layouts.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think we'll end it there. That's great. Excellent questions, and obviously a lot of interest from the attendees. They're very interested in your methods and just the success that you had. And I will post that prompt list alongside the webinar, and that'll be there early next week, if not earlier. So I just wanted to once again thank you so much, Jeff, for taking out the time. I know you're a very busy person, and so I really appreciate you squeezing us in. And we definitely will invite you back with respect to the Markham project if they give you the permission. And just thank you so much for your time today, and wish you a great rest of your day.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for all your great questions.